The time is 10:01, and we will call this meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board to order. Today is Friday, February 26th, 2021, and we welcome everybody by video conference. I hope everybody here is well and has some semblance of normalcy after the crazy weather events of last week. It looks like everybody's got some, at least electricity, so that, first we will have roll call.
Chair Sarah Oates.
Present.
Martha Gail Reed Lynch.
Present.
Chance Bolton.
Present.
Clayton Black.
Present.
Rolando Castro.
Present.
Paola Castillo.
Present.
Mark McAnally. Stephanie Robinson.
Present.
And Lisa Sprinkle.
Present.
Morning, Lisa.
Good morning.
Do we need to go for staff that's on? Is that necessary?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
we're good to go.
Very good. At this time, I'd like to note my intention of moving agenda item number 7. We're going to move it to just before agenda item number 18. And I have asked Mr. Castro to open the meeting today with our mission moment.
You will see my well house and you just take a look.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to share a few things about why I decided to join TALCB, the board, and some of the core principles that will hopefully guide my decisions throughout my tenure. I've only been a part of this board a short time. However, in that time, I have seen how dedicated my fellow board members are to the continued success of the appraiser profession. I'd also be remiss in not acknowledging the staff members that have continued to work hard despite extraordinarily difficult circumstances during the global pandemic and just this latest winter kind of pandemic that we've had. From what I've seen, no matter what the hurdles that have been presented to them, they continue to strive to work hard for consumers, for the appraisers, and for the board. So for this, I'm thankful, as it has made my transition into this board and into the role as seamless as possible. As I see it, serving on the board gives me the opportunity to give back to an industry that has given me so much in my life. During my time as an appraiser, I have gained a wealth of knowledge, several lifelong friends, and a true sense of community. No matter how long you've been at this in this business, from the first year trainee to a seasoned appraiser with several decades under your belt, there's always something new to learn. It may be from a class that is taken, from a new technological process that may make us more efficient at our jobs, or to a conversation with a colleague about a subject that was previously new to us. That is what I find intriguing about the appraisal profession, and giving others those same chances that I had is what drew me to serving on this board. As such, I feel it is the task of this board to continue to provide these opportunities to all our stakeholders in the most efficient and effective way possible, while preserving integrity and accountability throughout the process. It is our job to remain accessible, responsive, and transparent to the consumers and producers of real estate services, and eliminating those barriers that hinder the appraisal profession's growth is a continued goal of this board. If we can make these things more efficient for those entering and staying in the appraisal industry while continuing to maintain and safeguard the public interest, I believe that the board will have served its intended purpose and the chance for me to give back to the appraisal profession. Once again, thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That was very well said. I agree, Martha Gill. Thank you. We have 2 new faces on the board today. So we will say hello to them, and with 2 new faces, that means we will be saying goodbye to two of our well-regarded board members as well. First, we have Ms. Paola Castillo, who joins us from Weslaco, where she is Vice President for Frost Bank. We're extremely grateful to Governor Abbott for replacing Mr. Pena with another banker, as that perspective has been invaluable to our board, obviously. And we Haven't had a board member from the Valley in a lot of years, so we greatly appreciate you volunteering to come up to Austin when we resume in-person meetings and making the trek up here and representing that part of the state. So we welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also welcome back Mr. Mark McAnally to the board. Mr. McAnally was designated as by the Executive Secretary of the Veterans Land Board. He previously served on this board in this capacity. Mr. McAnally, as far back as we could find was 2003. Does that sound right?
I believe that's right. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
2003 to 2016. So he is a veteran of this board as well. He is the Deputy Director and Chief Appraiser for the VLB and GLO. And so we're glad to have both his appraiser experience and his state agency perspective as a resource for this board. So we welcome him back.
Thank you.
And so at this time, we will say goodbye to two departing board members, Mr. Tony Pena and Mr. Buster Renfro, neither of which were able to join the video conference this morning, but we wanted to recognize them publicly, and I told them both that they could watch this later and receive their thanks. So Mrs. Reed Lynch wanted to thank Tony on behalf of the board, and I know Commissioner Buchholz also wanted to say a few words, and then I'll open it up to anyone else.
Well, Tony is a senior vice president at Citibank, Texas, and former market president of First Capital Bank of Texas, both in Lubbock. Tony went to college at Lubbock Christian University. Tony was appointed to the TALC board in 2016 with 4 other new members, including myself. It was a very interesting year as 5 of the 9 members were new. And Jamie Whitcliffe was our chair at the time, and she brought us along, and she encouraged us to learn as much as we could, and that we had a voice, and it did make a difference, and to share as much as possible. And I guess you had a bunch of mouthy people all at once, but it was a great way to get our feet wet and get to know Tony and all the other new members, and for us to learn, meet everyone. Tony was involved and active from day one. Tony's voice was always desired for many reasons. Tony had a unique perspective.
An appraiser, and but uses the services of appraisers, and so I think that brought a consumer perspective that is always essential to the work that we do. I also appreciate his ability to call a spade, or to be direct, but to do so with just a very high level of kindness and respect. I saw there were some contentious conversations when I first came on, and I saw his interaction in those to just be very respectful and direct. I like that. Let you know where you stand. He has also been very complimentary of staff and warm in his encouragement of staff. And so on behalf of staff, I'd like to thank Tony for just his encouragement of us and for his thoughtfulness of where we sit. So thank you, Tony, for your service. It comes at a cost, as all things do. And we're grateful that you would be so willing to give of your time and energy for this board.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. If anybody else had anything they wanted to add, then I'd like to open the floor.
Oh, well, I'll be glad to jump in and say thank you, Tony, for your service. It's been a pleasure serving with you. I feel like you brought a great deal to the board with your banking expertise and life skills in general. So you've been a valuable asset to the board, and it's been a pleasure serving on you, not only on the board, but on the budget committee as well. And thanks for chairing that recently. So appreciate it. And I'll try to see you when I come up to Lubbock for a game or something.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Mr.
I'd just simply like to say that it was great working with Tony. He served on the enforcement committee. We worked through a lot of difficult issues and new initiatives, and I appreciated how
we lost you, Mr. Bolton. I can't hear him. Can anyone else hear him?
Lost your voice.
Well,
It's my mic was muting automatically. I don't know why. So anyway, I appreciate the thoughtfulness and Tony's unique perspective that he brought to that committee and the rest of his work that he did. And Tony, you're going to be missed, man.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Robinson, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I also would like to thank Tony. When I first joined the board, he was extremely welcoming and so helpful in educating me and getting me up to speed on where I needed to be as a public member. One of my fondest memories of Tony, I have many. One of the most fondest memories I have of him is I think it was my very first board meeting. He mentioned to me a Bible app. Because he does have a very strong Christian background and belief and system, and I so appreciated that because it allowed my nerves to kind of calm a little bit and be able to perform my duties. But I'll never forget that he was not afraid to speak from his heart and to share what he believed in such a great way. He was an incredible leader for me when I first came on and on the finance committee, as well as just a general board member. So I appreciate him and I'm going to miss him so much. I wish we had more time with him, but Tony, thanks for everything. I really appreciate everything you've done.
Thanks for sharing that, Stephanie.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, Tony was a client at his prior bank, so I've known Tony for a whole lot of years, and it was really nice to get to know him in a different capacity. And so I imagine that he and I will cross paths many times in the coming years in both of our roles. So I just really appreciated him lending his banking expertise to the board. It was really just so invaluable. Mr. Bolton would like to thank Mr. Renfro on behalf of the board, and then I will open that up as well.
Yeah, so I just want to say to Buster, I'm speaking to you. Thank you for your service. I really enjoyed working with you, and I'm going to miss your contribution in our committee meetings, board meetings as well. But the great thing about Buster was his very honest approach to problem solving and policy making. He is very willing to listen to all sides of an argument and is happy also to debate. And he gave us his 2 cents. We didn't always agree on everything, but I always appreciated what his perspective was. You know, Buster's like an appraiser's appraiser. He's a down-to-earth guy. And a good person to be around. I will say, Mark, I look forward to you on the board as his replacement, but Buster is going to be missed for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Commissioner?
I echo your words, Mr. Bolton. I'm grateful for Buster's insights. He also has a unique position on the board in that he is an appraiser, but he's also a state employee. So I think staff had a unique fondness for Buster just because we share some experiences, and he had a perspective that we shared. Buster has, in my experience, has been incredibly engaged. I get phone calls from Buster on a regular occasion, worried about, exam pass rates and identifying unique issues, and that sort of engagement is very encouraging. He's also very wise, and he's bold in his opinions, and sometimes I think that's hard as a appointee to feel comfortable sharing those opinions, and I think he did that very well. So Buster, you will be greatly missed. Mr. McAnally, we look forward to working with you. Thank you for your willingness to come back to the board.
I would just like to add something, Sarah, if I may.
Absolutely.
What I enjoyed was that coming into a meeting, Buster was so welcoming, and for a new person, and although we had lots of conversations on the phone, being an appraiser in West Texas, just coming into the meeting, he made you feel good. He made you feel wanted. He had a great smile for you. And then I have to add too, over the years, you could see his boldness. It wasn't cagey. It was direct. It was sincere. And I like to think of myself being in that way as well. Just getting to the point and saying what you have to say. So in placement of Buster, welcome, Mark.
I would also like to add something. When I first came on the board and we had our public meeting in Austin, acronyms were being thrown out left and right. I had no clue what they were. Buster was sitting next to me at the meeting, and I could write the acronym down, put a question mark behind it, and he would tell me what it was. He was so helpful, so welcoming, and just so open. It was really a pleasure to get to know him, and I appreciate everything he did, Buster. And welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Ms. Sprinkle. And before I say anything, did I want to open it up to anyone else?
Sure, I'll jump in just real fast. Just real quickly, want to say thank you, Buster, for your service. It has been invaluable as well, and it was a pleasure for me to serve on the board with you, and your expertise and wisdom that you brought to the board was fantastic. And me being a public member and not an appraiser, it was certainly nice to have your knowledge and background in the field. So thank you for all of that, and pleasure serving with you, and I consider you a lifetime friend as well. And welcome, Mark.
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Please go ahead, Ms. Robinson.
I'll say just a few words quickly as well to Buster. One thing that I think we all have said a little bit of is that Buster is definitely a straight shooter. By the time I got on the board, he had already been serving for a while. So he was certainly a straight shooter. He was very passionate about the things that he was concerned with, and he made those things known, which I love, because I believe that sometimes you need that certainty in the direction that you need to go forward in. He was also very instrumental in the pass rate situation that we were having in the state, and continuing to push forward on making sure that we did everything we could to help in that area with the young ladies that he was trying to assist as well. So that made a huge impact on me, and really I appreciated him so much for taking leadership in that role and pushing us forward. So Buster, we are going to miss you deeply, and I know your next journeys are going to be great, but thank you so much for your service. And again, welcome, Mark. Appreciate you joining us and volunteering your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would just like to echo that same thing that Ms. Robinson said. You kind of don't know why you're called to a certain, position at a certain time, but it was like all the things that Buster brought to the board were what needed to happen. The fact that I think he might be the only board member that had trainees, that has or had trainees during his time here, and for him to be somebody that, being at the GLO, he's obviously extremely trusted, and to say that I'm frustrated with this process, there's just some credibility in that. And for him to be in that position and know his trainees and advocate for them, I think it was such a great thing for our board, and at the perfect time for us to have that personal experience to lend to the conversation. And, whether or not we've been able to affect any change, at least we've been able to recognize the frustration in the marketplace. And I think that goes a long way. And the fact that he did not let it go. I mean, it was a topic of conversation for he and I for, well over a year. And so I just appreciate his tenacity in that place. And I think that it really did impact, our industry. And so I appreciate him for that. So he will be very missed, and welcome in his place, Mark. We'll now move on to agenda item number 5, which is the election of vice chair and secretary. At our November 13th meeting, officers were nominated, with Mrs. Reed Lynch being nominated as vice chair and Mr. Bolton being nominated for secretary. We can also consider nominations from the floor today, so I will open any discussion for any additional nominations. Is everyone muted or am I hearing none? So hearing none, I will entertain a motion to accept the nominations of Mrs. Reed Lynch for vice chair and Mr. Bolton for secretary.
I think I made the motion originally or nominate him, so I'll go ahead and make this motion as well. Madam Chair, I move that the nominations be closed and that Martha Gail Reed Lynch be elected to serve as vice chair and Chance Bolton be elected to serve as secretary.
Seconded.
We have a motion by Mr. Black and a second by Mr. Castro. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? The motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 6 is committee appointments. So after consultation with my fellow board members, the budget committee will be comprised of Mr. Black, Mr. McAnally, and Mrs. Robinson serving as chair. The education committee will be comprised of Ms. Sprinkle, Ms. Robinson, and Mr. Castro serving as chair. The enforcement committee will be Mrs. Escalante Castillo, Mr. Castro, and Mr. Bolton serving as chair. The executive committee by statute is comprised of the board chair, vice chair, and secretary. The AMC committee is entirely appointed by the governor, and the vice chair of the board serves as the chair of that committee by statute. So thank you everyone for volunteering to serve on these committees where we can dig in and become subject matter experts on various topics that come before the board. I greatly appreciate your willingness to serve. As a reminder to the public, the committee meetings are posted on the board's website along with the meeting's agenda and materials. As most of them are done by teleconference, you may listen in or participate as a member of the public at any time. As a reminder, we're moving agenda item number 7 to before agenda item number 18. So we are now at agenda item number 8, which is general comments from visitors on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for anyone to comment on items that are not on today's agenda. If you wish to speak on a matter specifically listed on the agenda, like Perea is under agenda item number 25, you may do so at that time. If you're a member of the public wishing to speak on non-agenda items, or if you have not signed up and you would wish to speak on something later today, you can email general.counsel@talcb.texas.gov. Just for those watching, I wanted to note that for Perea, we won't be taking any formal action on it today other than to have a discussion and set out a plan of action. And so there will continue to be opportunity for public comment on that. I have received a request from an individual wishing to speak today. Mr. Eduardo Alarcon, is he on? I just want to double check before I. Dion, do we know if he's joined?
I am present.
Awesome, very good. Thank you for taking the time to speak today. We just ask that you keep your comments to under 5 minutes.
Wonderful. I'd like to start off by thanking you guys for your time and service. This is a very specific application. I'm only dealing with the lakefront shore of Lake Travis in Travis County. And what's come to my attention is if you buy a lot along the lake shore, it is fully throated as being lakefront property. It only goes down to 715 feet. At 715 feet, the water goes over the spillway on Mansfield Dam. But yet, these properties are being appraised and being sold as lakefront or waterfront property. And TCAD, the Travis County Appraisal District, is taxing you, even though you only go down to 715 feet, as being waterfront. So my ask of this committee, of this board, is to update your continuing education classes for your appraisers, that when they do an appraisal, that they realize that when it's at 715 feet, it is not waterfront property, and that they have to report it as such to TCAD. The realtors, it's a little bit more difficult. You'd have to educate the brokers to let them know and let them teach their agents to quit over promoting these properties as being waterfront. They're lake view. They're not waterfront. And I realize this is going to take time. And this is for the entire lakeshore. This is not just me. This is everybody. And it's just something that you guys can modify. I don't know who's responsible for including the material in the continuing education classes and training your appraisers, so that if the realtor challenges them, that, you know, the realtors are normal, they're human, they want to promote it as being waterfront, they want that extra dollar, but they have to stand up and say, I'm sorry, it's not. This is not lakefront property or waterfront property, and let them work it out. But it's going to take time and patience and education and working with these people. But somebody needs to bring it to your attention that this is being done, and it's been going on for 30 years. This is not from one day to the next. The LCRA admits it. This has been going on for a long time. So I'm open to any questions. You've got my email addresses and my phone number. So if you guys want to call me individually or send me an email asking for more information, I'm more than happy to respond to you.
Thank you so much for bringing this to the board's attention. And given that this topic is not on our agenda and thus there wasn't public notice that it would be discussed, we don't really have the opportunity to discuss it right now, but I can assure you that we will investigate it and determine if it is something that this board has authority over, and then we can potentially add it to a future agenda item for discussion. Thank you. We appreciate you participating.
Wonderful. And again, thank you guys for all your time and your effort and your work. It's appreciated by the public.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
My understanding is that we don't have any other requests for public comments unless there was anything added, you know, in the last 20 minutes or so. So I just wanted to check with Dion and make sure that we don't have any others. So hearing none, we will move on to agenda item number 9, the ratification of the official record of the November 12th, 2020 and November 13th, 2020 board meetings as approved for posting on the website by the secretary of the board. And these can be found in your materials on pages 43 and 45. Do we have any changes? I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the board ratify the minutes of November 12th, 2020 and November 2020 board meetings.
I will second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Reed Lynch and a second by Mrs. Robinson. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 10 is the final orders and surrenders. I'll ask the board to look at pages starting on page 51 in your materials, which are the final orders and surrenders under enforcement matters A, B, C, D, and E. We did not receive any requests for public comment on any of these matters. No action is required by the board on this agenda item, but do any board members have any questions about these items? Hearing none, we will move on to committee reports, agenda item number 11. The budget committee report is included in the meeting materials on page 77. Mr. Pena chaired this meeting, so I will ask Mrs. Robinson or Mr. Black if there's anything from the report that either of you would like to highlight for the board.
I did want to highlight a few things, Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes, ma'am.
The budget committee was we had a great meeting back in January. The staff did propose some amendments to the fiscal 2021 budget to reflect some adjustments that needed to be corrected. So from my understanding, I believe Ms. Renata may be going over some of those numbers later on today, so that as a board, we can all be aware of what the changes are in the numbers related to the beginning balance that we previously reported to the board versus what it actually is now. So that'll be discussed a little bit later. So I wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Also, I know one of the big topics for this last board meeting was to make sure we are functioning on a balanced budget and to do everything we can to move forward as an agency to make sure our budget is completely in balance. And I just wanted to thank Chelsea, Commissioner, for her leadership in taking the lead on this with the agency internally, as well as Renata and the rest of the staff to come up with some really innovative ideas to be more efficient as an agency. I am very excited to hear some of the plans that they will have presented for the next budget meeting. And I think it's just going to make us a stronger agency as a whole in order to do that. So I just wanted to point out those two things. One, that we will be going over some numbers that were reported by error. And then the second thing, just thanking the staff for their extremely hard, the hard work that they've definitely put in to help us to become more balanced. So thank you guys for that.
Thank you. I'd like to just also add that Ms. Robinson and I met with Renata a few days before that budget committee meeting, because we didn't, our short time on the board, we just didn't have a really good understanding of the budget, and she sat down and really went over it with us so that we could understand, which I think is going to serve Ms. Robinson well in chairing that committee. So I appreciate that very much. Next is the AMC Advisory Committee, Ms. Reed Lynch. The AMC Advisory Committee report is included in our meeting materials on page 81. Is there anything that you would like to highlight from that for the board?
I think that it speaks for itself, and we will be discussing an item, agenda item 20, periodic reviews. So I'll just take that time to talk about those later, but I think it's fine as stands.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed Lynch. I appreciate that. The executive committee report is included in our materials on page 85. And so we talked about legislative matters. As most of you know, we're currently in our biennial legislative session. And so we discussed what recently filed bills, and we will continue to monitor those, of course, until sine die. Commissioner Buchholz also updated us on staffing and organizational shifts that we will be discussing later on as well. So agenda item number 14 is Ms. Robinson, the Education Committee report is included on page 89. Is there anything from that report that you would like to highlight?
Yes, so we had another great meeting with the Education Committee, and thanks for everyone who participated in that, Ms. Sprinkles as well as Mr. Castro, our staff, and a special thank you to Joe Waller from FACT and Sylvia Buss from Champion School of Real Estate for coming in from the public or from the outside attending that meeting. And thank you so much for the input that they had. That was extremely helpful. There's also an update that will be given to us eventually on the credit card processing for ACE one-time course offerings. That was a suggestion from a public person that had joined the meeting several meetings ago. And I just wanted to thank the staff for acting upon that request and moving forward with getting the resources in place to do that, to offer the credit card payment options online. Also, we looked at course evaluations for our for our education providers. One of the things that I really wanted to take a look at with everything going digital, as opposed to our face-to-face education, is ensuring that those digital learning courses are still giving the trainees and the participants, the students, the level of education they need to be successful in the field. I know that not everyone ideal way of learning is virtual, but because of the pandemic, a lot of people had to go that route. So the committee or the staff is working to get some of the course evaluations just so we can hear direct feedback from the providers on how their students are doing in those online virtual courses, just so we can partner with them if we do see any issues. We can partner with them in order to help the students enhance that environment and learning environment. Last thing that came up in our committee meeting that was awesome, really, really great to bring up was the PAREA, which I know we're going to be talking a lot about that. So that I'm really looking forward to, as a board, kind of discussing that, learning more about it, and determining if it's going to be a good fit for Texas or not. So that's what I have for our education meeting. If I heard you correctly, Madam Chair, Mr. Castro will be our leader in moving forward with that. And I am super excited to serve alongside with you, Mr. Castro. And I know that you're going to be an incredible chair for the Education Committee. And please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you.
Thank you, Mrs. Robinson.
Absolutely.
This brings us to agenda item number 15, which is the reports from staff, which start on page 93 in our meeting materials. And I will turn it over to the commissioner.
Fantastic. Okay, you will be hearing from myself and Tony this morning, but I want to encourage each of you to ask any questions of any of our staff related to these staff reports. We have a summary of the reports on that first page, but we welcome questions. First, welcome to new board members, Mr. McAnally and Ms. Escalante Castillo. We're excited to work with each of you and to get to know you. Congratulations also to our reappointed members, Ms. Reed Lynch and Mr. Bolton. I hope each of you fared well in the weather and utility emergency of last week. Aren't you glad that we didn't have this board meeting scheduled last week? We did have a commission meeting scheduled for that Tuesday, which was then postponed to Wednesday and then Friday. It did occur on that Friday, just in the nick of time for what is allowed for a postponed meeting due to an emergency. Our offices were closed all of last week, President's Day on Monday, and then the remainder of the week just because of the utility emergency. Our staff focused on survival, much like many of you, I'm sure. We continue to have a handful of staff with ongoing issues, primarily a couple who live in apartments either without water or with broken pipes. So I am touched by the way our staff have come together to support those in need within our work community. As for remote working, we continue to operate mostly remote. There's really no change in this regard. We continue to process the mail twice a week and the funding that comes in the mail. So a few staff are in the office to handle those duties. We also have a few that come in to onboard new employees and to address a handful of other tasks that require physical presence, grab a physical file, that sort of thing. We have had a few reported COVID cases in the office, and that includes exposure to others. And that's been enough to cause us to operate with great caution. I am ready to sit around a table and see the whites of actual eyes. And I have noticed that over time we do lose something, the ability to collaborate, to use innovation. But I am thankful for our opportunity to continue to work remotely and look forward to the day that that is on a much more limited basis. Wanted to mention the legislative session. This is the most unique session I have ever experienced. I'm sure the same is true for you. We have very limited ability to visit offices, to build those relationships personally, to tell our story by sitting in the same room with legislative staff. So for that reason, progress is very limited. In my opinion, this is a good session for that. There's not a single item on the TALCB legislative initiative list that just has to be done now. We are monitoring several bills. We have regular check-ins with stakeholder groups. We have provided feedback to members and coordinate efforts with them. We're very active in the process, but this just looks and feels different than what we are used to. So please let me know if you'd like to be more engaged in that process. Tony will provide you with a little bit of an update of where we stand from a TALCB perspective in just a few minutes. I did want to just make mention, you all are aware of the reorganization within the agency, and that is, said simply, just the shift of licensing underneath the appraiser umbrella, the TALCB umbrella. That is now overseen by our new director, Melissa Tran. Experience audits are being processed by the licensing team. So we now, under the TALCB umbrella, have a licensing team and a enforcement team that conducts all of the complaint processing. Both of those teams are overseen by Ms. Tran. I think I'm really excited about that change, and am proud of the way staff are settling in to that and have been open to the shifts. We have maintained 3 staff vacancies to date. That's 1 attorney, an investigator, and 1 support staff. We intend to continue in this regard, but I just wanted you to know of a couple of variables. Our complaint numbers are on the rise, and so we may need to revisit staffing needs in the coming months, and we can talk more about that. But for now, I would like to just continue to examine and to watch for trends, and to primarily see how the recent changes affect our needs, and to reassess as we go. To a large extent, I believe that we've had too much change to make a decision on what we need today. I'm not suggesting we've had too much change, just that there's too much change to make decisions on what additional changes need to be made. We need time to settle in and see how what we've done works. The changes include the reorganization, the revised PIC review process. It's before you today. The uptick in the complaints. Our 1 attorney has been out on an extended leave, and we've recently received the award and begun implementing the ASC grant funds to develop complaint and application portals. So these are all big items that collectively can be very effective, but we need time to see what that looks like. I want you to also notice in the budget materials that as of today, we have expended less than we've collected without tapping into the reserves. So we expect to tap into the reserves for about $500,000 of funding this fiscal year, but we have not had to do so thus far. What I read this to mean is that by maintaining the staff vacancies, we are living within our means just barely. So we will talk more about this, but I just wanted you to have that picture today. That is a different picture than we talked about in the budget committee meeting, even just last month, which is again an indicator of just the need for time to settle and to watch for these trends. So that's all I have for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question. Is there a causation that has been determined for the large increase in complaints being filed?
Yes, I think we can talk about 2 things anecdotally, and I'll start, and it'll give Ms. Tran an opportunity to unmute her mic and to fix anything I say incorrectly. But the first is anecdotal, and that is that the housing market has created such a demand for appraisers that folks are waiting a long time to receive appraisal reports, and are somewhat displeased with just the lack of access to appraisers. That's one, and it's only anecdotal. The bigger one is that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have now begun filing complaints. And so that is a fairly large percentage of our increase. Melissa, how did I do?
Yep, that's exactly right, Chelsea. I think as of December of this year, 15 of our complaints were Fannie Mae referrals, which turned into staff-initiated complaints. So definitely taking a lot more staff resources, but we're just hoping with all of the process efficiencies we're implementing, it'll offset some of that volume increase.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Tran, I had a question. You mentioned that Freddie Mac is starting to initiate the complaints or file recommendations, which initiates the staff complaints. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
When did that start?
It actually started about June of last year, June of 2020.
June 2020. Okay. And was that as a result of what? Why did they start doing that?
So the way that I've understood it was they used to do it. They referred complaints about 10 years ago, but recently and then I guess there was just a policy shift in their however they do things. But it started back up around July of 2020, where they started to make referrals to all states as part of their review program.
Okay, I see. And then on the complaints that we have been receiving, what level of complaints are they? Are they severe? Or are they low-level complaints? Can you kind of give me a ballpark on that?
Yeah, so as of December, we closed 14 Fannie Mae complaints. 4 of those resulted in CDs, and then the rest of them were dismissals or dismissals with warning. The Fannie Mae complaints are like the oddball complaints that don't fit into the typical, they're kind of weird properties that have unique issues with them. So yeah, so as of December, only 4 of them resulted in CDs and the rest were dismissals.
Okay,
And
thank you.
CD is a contingent dismissal.
Sorry, contingent dismissal, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's good to know, because that in particularly those types of complaints aren't as time consuming on staff that so the deep dive would take. So if that's I'm glad we have that mechanism that we can just assess those and get them out and go on and not take the time.
Well, I've looked at them through, I've seen a couple of these through peer reviews, Ms. Reed-Lynch, and I would say that although that might seem to be the case, it's not necessarily the case, because as Ms. Tran said, these are typically odd properties. So it's a mobile home in an area that has very few mobile home sales. And so the comparables are really far or very different. And so they're the type of properties that shouldn't really be going through the secondary market because they're so odd. But somebody has tried to push them through, and so they get stuck in the process. And I think that's from the ones I've seen, that's why they're getting kicked back to us. So first, just for some of you, especially the public members, if you say, I have a property, it's 8 acres out in Bastrop with a house, and you go to a bank and say, I'd like to get a mortgage on it, the bank might say, well, this fits within that little perfect Fannie and Freddie box, and so we can get you a really low rate, and we can package this up and sell it to the secondary mortgage market, because when they're just looking at all the data, it fits within those parameters. And then when you have something that's kind of an oddball, it either doesn't make it through the process because the adjustments are too high, or everything about it just kind of doesn't fit. So then you end up having to get conventional financing, like at a bank, which would make you have a rate, a much higher rate, probably in the 4s or 5s right now. So obviously borrowers are really pushing, they push the mortgage brokers to try and get into the Fannie and Freddie market, even if their property is a little atypical. So that's what I feel like we're seeing, are those properties that aren't really a good fit for that. When you have a cookie cutter house in a neighborhood where all the houses are the same and you have 1 million sales, those are the perfect thing that you can look at on a metadata level, and that's why they're easy to package up and send into the secondary mortgage market. So that's what I would say that we are seeing. And it's a little frustrating from my perspective that we are spending so much board resources, because in order to investigate a Ms. Reed-Lynch, to get back to my point, you kind of have to really dig into it because there's just not good data. So you have to figure out, did they use the right comps? if they didn't, where are the good, I mean, they're just very difficult. And so it's frustrating to me that we're spending so much board resources suddenly on investigating these because somebody tried to push them through something that wasn't really a good fit. And so that's something I want to figure out and I want to tackle. And I don't think that we have anybody on the board right now is sort of a Fannie Freddie expert that can look at these and say, oh, I get why this got flagged. And yeah, it should have been flagged, or, no, it's just an off property. So that's something that Mr. Bolt and I have talked about. How do we find that expertise and maybe take all these and see if we can process them through somebody who has that kind of level of expertise so that we're not spending so much resources on it.
Oh, well, thanks for the clarification.
Sorry, it was long-winded.
Madam Chair, we'd be happy to take that up in the enforcement committee and see if we can make some progress.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
That's exactly what I was going to try to suggest. If maybe the enforcement committee can come up with something to kind of expedite that process for that group of complaints, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we can work with if we can work with Ms. Tran and figure out, if sending these through, the PIC process and finding somebody to do those, or, in some way handling these so that they aren't so burdensome on staff.
I think the first step that the committee probably needs is some education.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can kind of wrap our hands around what the actual problem is, and then we can work with staff to see if we can find some solutions and implement them.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just so that I can get my vocabulary up to date, I heard a presentation about the complaints and a reference to CD. What is that?
Those are contingent dismissals, Mr. McAnally.
Okay, I understood agreed orders and revocations. I just didn't know what CD was. All right, thank you.
And Madam Chair, I had another question. I'm sorry, before we move on. For Ms. Tran, are there already some ideas that you're developing that you can share today, or in terms of how to handle this increase, or would you prefer to take some time and work directly with the enforcement committee?
I think this is probably the first time that we had this discussion, right?
Okay.
And I don't recall that we've talked about it. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
But I'll let you go ahead and answer that.
Things to research. It'll be on my list of things to research, and I look forward to working with Mr. Bolton and the enforcement committee on a solution.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you for all your hard work on that.
Thank you, Melissa. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to Tony.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Tony Slagle, Deputy Commissioner with the board. I'm going to talk to you about some customer service issues as well as some other things. The Commissioner mentioned the legislative update. That is on agenda item 23. I'm happy to wait till then, or it's not a whole lot. I can do it now. It's up to you, just however you want to handle that. I did want to mention some issues, or some things that happened with the contact center based on the weather event that happened last week. As I always do, I sent all of you a monthly report for January, and things looked great for January, and things looked great up until the winter storm hit us. We were closed for that entire week, and that obviously had an impact on our numbers. Just to give you some context, prior to that Monday that we were closed for President's Day and the winter storm, we were averaging about 4,400 calls into the contact center with about an average of a 15-second hold time and a 2.9% abandonment rate. As of this week, when things got back up, we started, accepting calls again. We, as of yesterday, into business yesterday, we had received. Let's see, I apologize. We had received 6,305 calls as of end of business on Thursday. So it's almost a third of the calls coming in came in on Monday of this week. And we also received roughly 1,300 emails on Monday as well. So there's an obvious impact on the call center, our contact center. The metric for the month now is hold time is 3 minutes and 26 seconds, which, considering that we are on par for having the same number of calls into the contact center that we average on a February, and we were closed for a week, is pretty impressive. Considering we haven't seen all of the calls yet. I will say this, one of the good things about the contact center now is we have things in place, systems in place, a director in place, where we can recover significantly quicker than we had in the past. So by the end of business on Wednesday, we were answering emails within 24 hours again. We had deleted all the backlog. As of yesterday, our hold time was down to 29 seconds. Even though the call volume was still up, we needed to sort of recalibrate some things, but we got to the point where we were where the contact center was operating the way it should. So the good thing is that we have things in place where when these outliers happen, we're able to address them quickly, and get back on to where we need to be. So I just wanted to update all of you on that, that the numbers will be skewed by that weather event for this month, but I don't believe it's anything anyone needs to be concerned about, because we're right back on pace in terms of doing things the way we need to, and that's due largely in part to all the hard work of the staff and the director. I just, as I say often, get to stand up here and tell you guys how great they are. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that before I move on to my next item.
Well, I just wanted, for clarification for Ms. Escalante Castillo, TALCB only has 6,000 license holders, but we share a contact center with Trek, who has 180. Is that about where y'all are now? 180,000 license holders. So when Tony says we had 6,300 calls, obviously with only 6,000 appraisers, we're just a fraction of that. And our response time for both calls and emails was something that the Sunset report really dug into, and so that's why when Tony gets up here and talks about 30 seconds versus 3 minutes, that's why we're talking about that, because it's something that we've been keeping track of for the last 2 years. So.
And I apologize for not having the direct board numbers for today. I'll email that out to everybody after the meeting, just so you have an idea. Usually they track pretty closely to everything else. Oddly enough, the hold time's usually a little longer on the appraiser, or I'm sorry, not the whole time. The abandonment rate's a little longer, so appraisers are, I don't know, maybe a little less patient to sit on the phone, and they hang up. It's not by much, but it's usually it trends slightly longer, or a higher percentage. But I just for transparency, I'll send that out at the after the meetings, just so you have those numbers. And again, I'm sorry I didn't have those for this meeting.
No.
Well, to me, it just shows, like Sarah said, it was a huge problem. A few years ago, it was a huge and bad problem. But it shows me that everything we've done is working. And Tony, thank you for keeping us aware of it. But it's a great job and great staff, and it was proactive measures that were taken, and they worked.
I think it speaks volumes that we're talking about, that a 3 minute hold time makes us a little, because we just don't see that anymore. We don't see that on an average month. A high hold time is 1.5 minutes. Usually we're at 1 minute or less. So.
Well, and I want to commend staff on that as well, because I know that a lot of people were dealing with their own personal catastrophes in their lives. And so to then have to come out of that last week and then tackle something like this, when you get back to work, I know it was probably a lot. So we certainly appreciate all the effort by staff on that.
Amen.
So the next item I was just going to talk about briefly was the AMC registry, just to give everybody an update on that. So since our last meeting, the AMC registry has been opened up. For those of you who are new to the board, AMCs as of last year were required to pay a registry fee and be placed on a national registry. That fee is calculated by, it's $25 per panelist for the AMC, and that fee is based on the panelists that did a covered transaction, which is defined by our rule and by federal law, to a panelist who did a covered transaction for the previous calendar year. So they're paying a fee based on all the covered appraisers who did covered transactions from January 1st of 2020 to December 31st of 2020. We open up our portal at the beginning of January, so we open it up on January 4th this year, and it'll be open until March 31st, and AMCs can go in and report that data and pay the fee at that time. Out of 170 AMCs we have registered with the board right now, 38 have already gone on and paid. I don't think that's anything to be concerned about. The fees are typically high, so it makes sense that an AMC would wait to report it rather than doing it early. We'll let you know if there's any concern getting closer to the deadline, but I don't think there will be. We will continue to message and remind people who haven't done it just that they need to do it, as we did last year. I think we were I think maybe only 3 or 4 AMCs did not report last year. So again, I don't see any concern with the 38 we have already reporting. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Does anybody have any questions for Tony? Thank you so much. Thank you to you, Commissioner, for those reports.
You're welcome.
This brings us to agenda item number 16, rules for possible adoption. So as a reminder, these are the rules that were discussed at the last board meeting, and they've been published in the Texas Register for public comment. We did not receive any public comment on any of them, so they are before the board today, again, for adoption. Generally, it takes about 20 days before the rule becomes effective after it's submitted to the Texas Register again. So agenda item number 16A is on page 115. It's an amendment to 153.15, experience required for licensing. This is pertaining to the submission of work files for trainee audits and communications with the supervisory appraisers on matters concerning their trainees. Does anybody have any questions before we take this up for Mr. Bolton or Ms. Santos? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 of the Texas Administrative Code 153 TAC 15 as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Seconded.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Mr. Castro. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously. 16B is located on page 119, and it is an amendment to 153.24 concerning complaint processing, specifically complaints which we consider to have been filed in bad faith. This came out of the hard work of the Enforcement Committee. Does anyone have any questions on this amendment? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to Title 22, Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 153.24, as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. Black. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. 16C is located on page 129, and it is an amendment to 153.28 concerning the peer investigative committee reviews. This is the rule that expands the scope of the PICs, and it provides more board oversight into the enforcement process. Does anybody have any questions about this one? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption new Rule 22, Texas Administrative Code, Section 153.28 as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Sprinkle and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. This takes us into the next agenda item, which is executive session. And the time is 11:08. The board will now go into executive session to obtain the advice of legal counsel or discuss pending or contemplated litigation, including settlement offers and enforcement actions pursuant to Texas Government Code 551071 and personnel matters pursuant to Texas Government Code 551074. We have quite a few items to discuss, so I anticipate returning about 12. Let's say 12:40. This will give the board, and we'll take about a 10-minute break. And then we will all have to leave this meeting. There's a separate link for the executive session meeting. And so it's 11:09, so at 11:20, we will all rejoin the other link for the executive session. Am I saying that all correctly, Mrs. Santos? Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's all correct.
Very good. Okay, I will see everybody again in 10 minutes and the rest of you at 12:40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And reconvening an open session. I will note that Mr. Black has stepped out, and probably for the remainder of the meeting, he has an emergency related to the weather issue last week. We moved agenda item number 7 to this spot, so we will now consider number 7, discussion and possible action regarding appointments of mentors. The list of the 2021 mentors is located in our materials on page 11 and precedes all of the individual applications. So I will let Ms. Tran give us staff recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff has reviewed the applicants and recommends appointments of mentors 1 through 8 as listed in the materials.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Tran? If not, then I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the board appoints mentors 1 through 8 to serve as mentors for a period of 2 years.
I will second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Ms. Robinson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 18. As a reminder, these are the rules that are coming before the full board for the first time. After we deliberate and discuss, we may move to submit the rule for publication in the Texas Register, and then that opens up a period of public comment. At the next board meeting in May, we will consider any public comments that we receive in the interim, and then that provides us with another opportunity to discuss further, make changes, or then we will submit it for final adoption. The first one is found on page 135 in your meeting materials. It is the discussion and possible action to propose new Rule 22, Texas Administrative Code 155.3, certain uses of logo or name prohibited. Ms. Santos will introduce us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kathleen Santos, General Counsel. This rule does exactly what the title suggests. It prohibits certain uses of the agency's logo or name that would imply that the user is a governmental agency, is somehow endorsed by the agency, or holds some particular status that the agency has not granted. The proposed language was brought before the executive committee, and they have asked to recommend this to the full board. I'm available to answer any questions regarding the rule.
Hearing no questions for Ms. Santos, we'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit new Rule 22, Texas Administrative Code 155.3 is presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for this proposal.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. Bolton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 19 is found on page 139 in your materials. This is the discussion and possible action to propose new rules of 22 Texas Administrative Code 15751 petition for adoption of rules. I will again let Ms. Santos explain.
Okay, for this one, this rule really implements a statutory requirement that an agency adopt a rule outlining procedures for an interested person to petition the agency to initiate rulemaking, and this is pursuant to section 2001.021 of the Government Code. The rule before you today lays out the content requirements of this petition and how an interested person can submit it to the agency. The language in the rule allows for the executive committee to make that initial determination of, one, whether to deny the petition, or to initiate the rulemaking process by placing the item on either the next agenda for a board meeting or refer it to an appropriate committee. And I also wanted to note that the amendment here also makes a change to the subchapter name, which currently has negotiated rulemaking, but we're making the change to just rulemaking to accommodate the negotiated rulemaking rule and also this rule, just kind of broaden that subtitle. And again, I'm available for any questions you may have.
So this sort of comes out of the legislature at some point really wanted all agencies to really define how interested parties in the public could propose a rule. And so this gives them sort of the framework to do that. And I would mention that members of the public are always welcome to come to our board meetings and speak during our public comment section to bring anything before us. So I think that there is opportunity, and I'm glad that this sort of outlines it, because I think there's some people who are kind of confused about how they could get involved in the process. So this kind of outlines it. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is just another route, and we've setting out the rules of how they can do it.
Fantastic. More transparency. I like it. Does anybody have any questions? If not, then we can entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit new Rule 22 TAC 157.51 as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for the proposal.
And I second.
We have a motion by Mr. McAnally and a second by Ms. Robinson. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 20 is found on page 143 in your meeting materials. It is the discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC 159-155 periodic review of appraisals, and this came out of the AMC Advisory Committee, so I will let Mrs. Reed Lynch introduce it.
Okay, Appraisal Management Company Committee, in an effort to reduce the regulatory burdens on license holders, proposed an amendment to Rule Chapter 159-155, Periodic Review of Appraisals. This process actually began with a proposal submitted in November 2015 at the board meeting, and for whatever reason it had not gone forward. But what it did was it made the rule more concise, more consistent, took out additional information that was already in USPAP and all our other rules, and just streamlined it. We went over the 2015 proposed amendment and reviewed it and came up with a new proposed amendment for this periodic review. Okay, and so we have in the back, and Pat will show you in the materials presented, we have the old rule, and then we have the redlined deletions, and then we have the new rule, which we believe is a much better rule, and it doesn't cover items that is already covered just in the requirements of doing an appraisal. It's not setting it out all over again in the scope of work. So, Kat, would you like to add to this?
No, I think you kind of summed up the changes that are summarized here. It's really just, allowing the adequate scope of work to dictate what's adequate in a scope of work. I don't know how else to kind of say it without being circular, but some of the comments that you had made, or maybe not everything requires or MLS can be used, and it sort of just leaves it kind of to the requirements of USPAP. Dictating the scope of work.
Exactly. In order to follow USPAP, you're doing these items anyway. You just don't have to repeat it over and over.
Very good. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Reed-Lynch or Ms. Santos? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 159.155, as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for this proposal.
I second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed-Lynch and a second by Ms. Escalante Castillo. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Aye. Anyone abstaining? The motion passes. Thank you for your work on that, Ms. Reed-Lynch.
Certainly.
Agenda item number 21 is the discussion of possible action regarding the request for Attorney General opinion found on page 149 in your materials. Ms. Santos?
Yes, I just have a quick update on the AG opinion. If you recall, back in May, the board requested an opinion from the Attorney General on the issue of whether the board could adopt a rule exempting appraisers licensed by the board from the statutory requirements of USPAP when performing an evaluation under the interagency guidelines. And shortly after our last meeting, the AG's office issued their opinion, and essentially what the opinion says is that one, a rule that would exempt an appraiser from compliance of USPAP as to an evaluation would conflict with our state law. Specifically, they reference section 1103.405. And then in addition, the opinion also goes into that generally agencies are required by state law that their rules be consistent with their statutory authority. And they found that if this rule had existed, would have violated, it would go beyond the statutory authority. So given those factors, the AG's office said that a court would likely conclude that the board would not be able to adopt this type of rule. And I think what the broader takeaway that this AG opinion provides is that in order for licensed appraisers to be exempt from the requirements of USPAP in performing an evaluation would require some sort of change at the legislature with our statutes. And it's my understanding that there are some wheels in motion that will address that one way or another, that issue. And so that's really the only update I had as far as the AG's opinion.
Fantastic, and hopefully Tony might have an update for us in his legislative update about where that is at the moment. So it really didn't solve any problems for us, but now we have it. Does anybody have any questions about it?
Madam Chair, I had a question on the response from the AG's office. So since we cannot remove the USPAP standards for the evaluation, I would like the opinion of the appraisers on the board. Are we still pushing to change that legislatively, or are we satisfied with that opinion?
I believe FACT is working on a bill.
Okay.
They're in the process at the moment.
Yeah, I think with a bill and potential new statute, that we don't have to have an opinion as to whether we like it or don't like it. The law is the law.
And I believe the Appraisal Institute is working with FACT and other states on getting some type of decision and some type of rule for this. So it's out of our hands, but it's not dead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? We keep waiting on the evaluation issue.
And we'll keep doing restricted reports.
Yeah, right. Just keep putting it on the agenda until forever. Okay, so this brings us to agenda item number 22, discussion and possible action regarding amendments to the fiscal year 2021 budget. This is found on page 155 in your materials, and I will turn it over to Ms. Williams.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes, agenda item 22 is indeed discussion and possible action regarding the FY 2021 budget amendment. And in accordance with the 2021 TALCB budget and investment policy, section 1.05A, staff is proposing an amendment to the approved fiscal year 21 budget to reflect the actual beginning balance for the fiscal year instead of the projected beginning balance. The actual available balance for FY 21 was $2,259,588 and not $2,876,112. The approved beginning balance was a projected beginning balance, and after reconciliation of accounts, the true beginning balance was indeed the $2.25 million. This amendment is to ensure that the board understands what our true balance was at the start of the fiscal year. No other changes to the budget are being presented at this time. Staff recommends to the board that they adopt the fiscal year 21 budget amendment as presented within the meeting materials that are found on page 157.
And so we voted on this was it the November meeting that we approved this budget? And so this is just a revision of that. And so it's coming before the board so that we can approve this revised version of it. So that's why it's coming to us again.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Williams?
Madam Chair, I just have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to thank you, Ms. Williams, for the presentation of the new budget. And I just wanted to make sure we brought this to the attention of the board so that they were aware of the different numbers in the beginning section there, that it did indeed change pretty significantly. So we didn't want to just move forward with making those changes without the board being fully aware of that financial difference.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Sprinkle.
The line item reads projected beginning balance. Should that read differently?
Yes, ma'am. So once the board approves the amendment, we will have an actual beginning balance. So right now it's still showing the projected beginning balance as it was approved, but once we formally approve it, that document will change to show actual beginning balance.
Good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Great attention to detail. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
So maybe I'm unclear, maybe I just missed it, but what is the reason for the discrepancy?
So the approved budget, the 2.8 million, was a projected balance, and the discrepancy actually was an Excel error. So when the staff was compiling the documents and the numbers, there was one figure that the formula should have subtracted the amount of projected expenses, and instead it added it added that number to the overall number. So instead of 2.8, it actually should have been 2.3 would have been our projected balance had we not had that Excel error. So after reconciliation of what our true ending numbers were, looking at the budget documents from over the summer, identifying that error, we wanted to bring it before the board to let everyone know that, one, we made a mistake, two, here's our actual position so that everyone's on the same page.
Does this hurt us? Are we still going to be able to make payroll and everything?
Yes, sir. So we're not in any position where we're not going to be able to make payroll. And actually, right now, we're in a position where our revenue has exceeded our expenses. And so we haven't even had to tap into the reserves that we thought we would. And as long as that trend continues, we're good. And we won't have to tap into the reserves. But right now, our revenue exceeds our expenses, which is the way that we should be.
Yeah, okay. So it's no harm, no foul, what we're basically saying.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay.
One final question, if I may ask.
Yes, sir.
It looks like the proposed expense is held basically the same, but I noticed that the Treasury Safekeeping Trust account also changed. Was that some sort of reconciliation after the initial budget was approved? The approved budget shows that the trustee account would have 2.138 million, and now it's showing 1.521.
Yes, sir. So as a part of that reconciliation with our beginning balance being 2,259,000, we subtract out our operating reserves of the 738,000, which leaves us truly available 1.5 million in the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company, as opposed to when we had the projected amount and we had 2.8 million, we subtracted out the 738,000 for our operating reserves. That would have left us with 2.1 as available. All of that in that budget approved 2021 was based off of the projected beginning balance, which was an estimate, and we also know there was an Excel error with that. So yes, sir, you should see the available balance within the Texas Treasury Safekeeping at 1.5 million.
Any other questions, Williams? Hearing none, entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to move that the board adopts the amendment to the fiscal year 2021 budget as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Robinson and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Williams and Ms. Robinson, for your hard work on that. Agenda item number 23 is the update regarding legislative matters. This is found on page 161 in your materials, and I will turn it over to Mr. Slagle.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. Tony Slagle, Deputy Commissioner. Shall I address the evaluation issue first?
Sure.
Okay. There is no formal bill filed yet. I did talk with the people moving who are working on that legislation, and they do have sponsors lined up. There was some negotiation, I believe, with the mortgage bankers trying to get that language worked out. I don't think it's anything significantly different than language that some of us have seen already, but anyway, I was told that it's in the process of being formally filed, and hopefully we'll see something soon. I just checked right before we got back into the meeting to see if anything had been filed yet, and it hadn't been filed yet. So I do know that today's the deadline to get things to the internal deadline to get things to Ledge Council, but I believe this language is already over there, so there's no need to be concerned about that. But as soon as I know something, I'll let everybody know. if it's.
Tony, have you seen a draft of it? Do you know what it looks like at this point?
No, not the version that's not the version that's going forward. I've seen a couple of different things, but I'd be lying if I told you if I know what the actual draft language that was sent over there looks like.
Can we get that from Eric Woomer, possibly?
Oh yeah, I could reach out to him. And
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Tony?
Yes, sir.
On this proposed legislation, if it gets filed, will you all have the opportunity to review that to see if there's going to be a fiscal impact to the agency for implementing that?
Yeah, yes, sir. I mean, because we're SDSI, we always look at what the impact is to the agency. There's never, whenever we get fiscal notes, there's never a fiscal impact, obviously, to GR, but we always look at anything to see if there's going to be any additional, staffing needs or programming needs or anything else, so that we're aware of that before we need to be, so that we have a plan in place.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyway, going back to the what I sent out, or what was sent out to you earlier by Dion as part of the materials, there is not anything specifically impacting this agency. There are several bills that deal with occupational regulation and occupational agencies in general that we're monitoring that would require us to change things or policies or rules, but nothing that is specific to the board. There is I'd just like to point this out to you, because you are government appointees, that there is a bill that's listed under the appointees section that would impact or have a direct impact on all of you. There's two bills there that actually would. Under that section, just know that we're monitoring that, because we do have governor appointees on the board. I will say that there, since this report was produced, there have been two other bills that were filed at the end of last week that I'd like you to be aware of. One is HB 1888, and this will be included in an update report in the next week or so, but HB 1888, which greatly expands the ability for state agencies to meet by video or teleconference. It replaces the current regulations that govern those meetings. Right now, we're meeting based on some waivers because of the pandemic, but this would codify some of those and allow the state agencies to meet remotely, or at least some of the members to meet remotely on a much more expanded level. And then HB 1939, while it doesn't have any impact on our regulatory ability or anything in terms of what we do as an agency, this is a bill that was filed last session, or similar to a bill that was filed last session, that provides a statute of limitations regarding a suit filed because an appraiser or appraisal review conducted by an appraiser or appraisal firm. It's a statute of it establishes a statute of limitations for those suits. So because it impacts our license holders, even though it doesn't impact what we do as an agency, we are monitoring that bill as well and want you to be aware of it. And then I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Slagle? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And by the time we meet again in May, it will be too late for any major things. So if you'll just keep us updated in the meantime.
I absolutely will be updating these as on a try to do it on a probably weekly, if not if bills that you're interested in, I'll let you know sooner than that. Yeah, definitely.
Tony, do you also do this for Trek?
I do.
Oh wow.
This report is inclusive of both, yeah, I will. If there's anything that impacts one of the agencies in particular, I always want to highlight that on the top of the report that we send out to you.
Sure. Okay. Very good. I imagine they have a lot more bills that they're tracking over there.
Yes.
If nobody has any other questions for Tony, that doesn't require any action from the board. Agenda item number 24 is the discussion and possible action regarding the scope and name of the Education Committee. And this came about because there have been things that we kind of think, well, where does this belong? Licensing seems to be the one thing that's kind of not covered in any of our committees formally. So we thought about changing it to licensing and education, or education and licensing. The thing that would, the kind of unintended consequence of this, and Mr. Bolton, I wanted to get your thoughts on it, is that it would in effect move experience audits out of the enforcement committee and over into this new education and licensing committee. I think the heavy lifting has already been done on experience audits, but I wanted to get all of your thoughts on the name change. Is it necessary? Is it something we want to do?
Absolutely, we should do it. I mean, it has been our, I think, goal to separate licensing activities and enforcement activities. And so therefore, an audit, which is part of a licensing activity, should not be an enforcement. We've done that. And I think that, you know, education and licensing is a great committee name. Or it could just be licensing, because education is part of licensing.
Oh, that's a great point.
I agree with the name change as well. Yeah, because we do tend to discuss topics that are a little bit outside of the education realm. So to include licensing, I think would be good. I would probably want it to be education and licensing in the name, because I don't want to lose the emphasis on education, because that's very important for our trainees and CUs and all of that. So I would probably say keep licensing and education, but definitely a good move in including those both together.
I agree. And
I would. Sorry, I would agree also, and I'm on the committee, and I definitely think it should say both.
Fantastic. That was easy. So we will move forward with that. I don't think that that there's any action required from the board to do that. The two attorneys looking at each other. We're good.
We're good.
Okay, we're good. If it did, then we can tackle that later. Agenda item number 25 is the discussion and possible action regarding the recent AQB adoption of practical applications of real estate appraisal, otherwise known as PAREA. However, we haven't quite decided as an industry how we're going to pronounce it. This starts on page 173 of your materials, and it's quite extensive. There's a lot of background in this. I will say the background has been a discussion as the AQB went through the process of vetting this this new way of licensing. For those of you that are new or part of or public members, there are sort of three components to being licensed. One is education, one is experience, and one is the exam. And so this is an alternative to the experience requirement, and it came out of the need because we have been hearing in the industry for a long time that trainees are having a hard time finding supervisors that are willing to take them on as trainees. And so the AQB set about figuring out an alternate path for that, and that's what this is. It has been vetted for many years. It's been many exposure drafts to it, a lot of meetings about it, a lot of industry input, and so it was formally adopted in January of this year. And so today what I would like to do is just to sort of figure out what the questions are that need answering and what our authority is as a board. And so I think that it's important that we have this discussion so that we give the market some certainty, because once we do, then at this point there are no providers that have developed a PAREA program, but I think they're waiting to hear from the states if it will be accepted before they take on that significant undertaking. And so I will let Ms. Santos sort of talk about what our authority is as a board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, you know, I won't go into overly go into detail about what PAREA is, because I think everyone who's interested is a bit familiar with what it is, which is sort of, as you mentioned, kind of an alternate form of experience outside of the supervisory appraiser training model in more of a virtual technological sort of format. What I tried to narrow the scope of the issue before the board, and to me it is based on interpretation of our statute, which if I can direct you to the materials, the relevant state statutes begun on page 296, but I think most relevantly right now is on page 297, section 1103-205, which is where my interpretation, my understanding of state law is that Texas would already accept PAREA, someone completing PAREA as experience for, at the moment it is for licensed residential and then certified residential. I think the way it's set out is there'd be kind of two separate pathways, and the way Texas law is written, that category, PAREA, is a category that AQB has adopted and thus is acceptable by the state of Texas. And then again, that's on page 297 of your materials, and I just wanted to point that out specifically. That is section C, subsection 1 of that statute, where it already says as an acceptable appraisal experience includes any one of the combination of categories recognized by the AQB, and the AQB has already recognized this as a category of experience. I think the next sort of prong of my recommendation is none of our state law or our rules address PAREA specifically. If you read them, they're all really address the traditional way that appraisers have gotten experience, which is through the supervisory appraiser training model. And so it would be my recommendation that there be some rule acknowledging PAREA. And then the next prong below that is within this board's power is to, if there were some additional requirements above PAREA that this board, as policymakers, you felt there needed to be for license holders, there is, our statutes also allow for that. And the reason why I bring that up is in part of the materials I tried to summarize comments that the board has submitted previously when the AQB opened up this program for comment from all states, and that's in your materials on page 177. The only sort of comments that I think were sort of unresolved by the final version of PAREA that was adopted is really, I think, was what the board described as like the boots on the ground experience part of the experience process. Whether or not you feel that there needs to be additional requirements above what the AQB has adopted, that's sort of the issue that's before the board. And I'm happy to address any questions. I tried to condense everything down as narrowly as I can, so that we're not, really debating anything that really isn't up for debate, or we can move forward on this issue.
So we had a request from Mr. Albert Garcia to speak on this. I don't see that he has joined our meeting. And is that correct?
That's correct, and unless I'm incorrect on that, Dion, please let me know. I don't see that he's in the lobby or has joined the call.
He has not joined the call yet.
Okay. And so if he is listening, we invite you, if you are unable to join today, to submit your comments in writing, and we will certainly take those into consideration as we move forward. So I think today's discussion, what we want to sort of highlight for members of the public and providers and license holders is that if AQB accepts it, then Texas accepts it by statute. And so we don't have any room to debate whether we like PREA or don't like PREA, or we think it's a good program or not, we accept it if they accept it. And so we can, if we do nothing, I think that creates some ambiguity in the marketplace. Then our other two options are to either expressly write a rule that accepts it so that it takes out that ambiguity, or we write a rule that accepts it and adds to it. And so I think that's the question. Those are the questions for us to talk about today. And once we come to sort of a decision, then we can, maybe send it back to the Education and Licensing Committee for possible, writing of the rule and figuring out the exact language. So I'd like to open it up for board discussion on what direction we should go.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Bolton.
I think that's great. It sounds like this is a pretty easy fix. The one thing, understanding that we do have the authority to make more stringent guidelines, I would just remind everybody on the board that the governor has given us a mandate to lessen burden on industry. And so I would, it would be my opinion that we should not add any additional requirements to the PREA program.
I would like to say something. I think that without a clear curriculum, and it's my understanding that they don't even have the specifics worked out yet, that any rule that we would make at this point would be very premature. I think that we just sit back, we wait until this is fully developed, and we can take a good look at it. Yes, we need to make it easier for the profession, but we also need to protect the public, and make sure that the people that are being licensed, that they have met at least minimum qualifications, even if they did use the PREA method. So I think it's all premature right now. We just sit back and wait for the program to be more fully developed.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any expectations or estimated time frames for the program to be developed? Have they given any guidance on that?
They haven't, but my understanding is that they were waiting to see. I would imagine most providers were waiting to see what states, and especially the big states like Texas, do on this before they invest in developing this program. I will say that Mark Lewis said they did a presentation about it recently, and I attended the webinar. And one thing that really kind of stood out to me was that he said, I don't want the states to think that we've just approved this and now we're moving on down the road. The AQB will be very involved in vetting the program before we approve it from any provider. It's going to be a very collaborative process, so that when the AQB does approve a provider to provide this, that we as states can feel comfortable that it has been fully vetted and that they answered all the questions before it ever comes to us. One thing that I think Kat sort of mentioned, but I wanted to really point out, because for whatever reason this wasn't apparent to me until the last several weeks, is that this program is only for certified residential and licensed residential. It does not apply to commercial. So I think a lot of the discussion that we had in the past about boots on the ground and having that personal interaction with a supervisor might have been more geared towards certified general. And I will say, as somebody who reviews residential reports somewhat regularly, that having some consistency in the training on the residential side, I think, is a really good thing. I think, you learn bad habits from your supervisor sometimes that just get carried forward, and we hear from appraisers, well, I do it that way because I've always done it that way and my supervisor taught me to do it that way. And so this might eliminate some of those bad habits that have just sort of carried forward generationally. So that to me is one thing that I really like about the program, but I wanted to point that out in case anybody else wasn't aware that it's only for the residential licenses. Now you can take that experience and apply it towards commercial, but you would still have to go find a supervisor and finish that track. Ms. Reed Lynch, I thought that I saw you had something. You're still muted. There we go. Oh.
My comment was just to agree with Lisa that it's too soon to make a determination, and I certainly couldn't agree with anything until I had read it. Even if I don't have a choice, I still would want to know more than, I mean, I just say it's too soon. And I'm not always surprised. So that's it.
I'm sorry. So to piggyback on those comments, it was my understanding that in order to start the PERIA process, you had to already have the qualifying education as a foundation before you start your experience credit in this program, essentially. So as Lisa was talking about, that there might be some kind of deficiency before you start that program. It was my understanding that when the AQB was going to start vetting these programs, that a prerequisite in order to start that process into this program is that you would have to already have your qualifying education. So you'd have some sort of foundation in order to gain that experience that you would have essentially in the supervisory or trainee role that you would traditionally have, where right now you can do it kind of concurrently. Whereas in this process, you have to have your classes first before you start your experience credit. So I think in this way, that would be a good way. This program would be a good thing, because the trainees would already have that basis in order to gain that experience. So that was my understanding.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I didn't realize that either. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
And really, we have time for this and stuff. So I think as more states, like you were saying, as more states kind of adopt this as part of the alternative to the thing we have now, I think that'll give these providers maybe an incentive to start going and kind of going through that process and in making these programs and into developing them. And yeah, it's gonna be a good bit before we probably see the first, second, third type of programs from the big companies before they get essentially incentivized as more states kind of adopt this program as part of their experience credits.
Are we aware of any other states who have?
I believe Iowa, as far as I know, Iowa is the only one so far that I've heard of.
Okay.
But I mean, just like ours, just like our state, I think every board is going through the same process we are and trying to kind of gauge where their state statutes are in regard to this, and discussing it openly in the public and kind of getting feedback. But as I said before, we have time because there's been no program so far that's been developed. So it's going to go through the AQB vetting process before it even comes to us. So yeah, I think we have some time to kind of think about what how we want to implement our statutes.
And as an agency, have we gotten any comments from the public or questions that have called into customer service regarding whether or not we accept this or at all?
Yeah, we got an email from the Appraisal Institute asking about it, and essentially that's what they were asking, is what our interpretation of our statute was. They had their own interpretation of what our statute said, and they just wanted to confirm that. So really, that's what the goal was today, was to publicly say what our interpretation of our statute was. And I think that is probably a good enough first step to give the marketplace the assurance that they need that Texas will accept it if they develop the program, that we will be accepting it, and that we could possibly add on to it if we feel that that's necessary, understanding that we do have a mandate from the governor to lower barriers to entry that will balance those two things. But at a minimum, we will accept somebody's Perea experience. And so this discussion serves as that. I don't know that there's probably 2 or 3 providers maybe that are even waiting for us to answer this question. And I would imagine that they are either paying attention, or listening, or will come back and look at this to get that assurance. But we certainly, Ms. Santos can, if someone reaches out, she can, now that we've talked about it as a board, she can give them that answer.
And I would like to possibly move forward on Ms. Sanchez's recommendation for us to make this into a rule, just to give some structure around it. So maybe that's something we can start thinking about as a board, what we want to put in that rule. And now the additional requirements may come later, of course, once the curriculum's developed, but at least some type of rule to structure it.
And possibly the Education and Licensing Committee can just start compiling their list of questions, kind of wrapping their head around it so that we are prepared to move forward at some point. Because it's been a really long process. So everybody has a lot of questions about it. And so if we start that discussion now, so maybe put it on the agenda just to kind of go over some parts of it. So as the questions develop, that we can answer them as we go along so that we're prepared at some point when we're ready to make a rule. Ms. Santos, do you think that is sufficient for action at this point? If we hold off on a rule, do you think that that's too ambiguous?
I think right now, if I'm understanding the conversation, it was sort of referred to the Education Licensing Committee to kind of dig into it a little bit more. I think as far as timing, there's plenty of time. As we've stated, there isn't something that exists yet. So something needs to be approved, and then someone would have to actually take it for us to get to the point where we're faced with sort of a certificate. So we do have, one of the good things about this is that we do have time. And so, yes, to answer your question, I think we're in a good spot to be at the stage of sort of, potentially drafting a rule or referring it to the Education and Licensing Committee to kind of tackle initially.
Very good. And if there's any members of the public that would like to submit comments, we would love to hear them, and certainly we'll consider them at the next Education and Licensing Committee meeting. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that discussion? Very good. We will move on to agenda item number 26, the discussion regarding the performance review and salary of the TALCB commissioner. Excuse me.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I muted to cough and forgot to come off. As a reminder to the public, TREC holds the authority for action as it relates to the commissioner's employment and salary, but they do seek input from us on the yearly performance review. We reviewed the report in the executive session, and I just wanted to note from that the commissioner got glowing reviews from the staff, and the average score for both the TREC and TALC boards were higher than the mid-year survey that we did in late summer. And so I just wanted to say a very job well done by the commissioner, and I think that the staff comments were glowing and really say a lot about her leadership, and we certainly appreciate all the stress that she's been under in the last 12 months and what she's done for our board while she's doing the same for the Real Estate Commission. I'll open the floor for any additional comments from board members.
I'd just like to add that it's been a really trying time with numerous issues, and you've behaved graciously, and we've all noticed, and we thank you.
I'll just add to that. Commissioner, you've done an excellent job. We thank you so much for your continued support and leadership for our agency and for our staff. So job well done, and we look forward to continuing to work with you as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Chelsea, I think you've done a great job. I think that one of the slight criticisms that we had was the communication with the board at the last review, and I think that's greatly improved. And I applaud your leadership in these difficult times. And I also applaud your innovation, because we're doing things nobody's ever done that's really making this agency better. And you're leading that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Bolton.
Very good. We will move to agenda item number 27, the discussion and possible actions regarding agenda items for future meetings. Ms. Santos, do you have anything that we need to add here?
I think we might be done with the Attorney General opinion. That's one of my notes that I have gotten written down. I don't know that I have any
evaluations, but done with the Attorney General's opinion.
Correct. I know I just have really just that Perea in the Education Committee, but I don't know if anyone else had any.
Have anything that they want to make sure that we tackle next time? Okay, agenda item number 28, discussion and possible action to schedule future meeting dates. We previously set a date of May 14th for the next board meeting, so I wanted to confirm that with everyone that that still works for all our board members. No conflicts have come up. So we will confirm that date of May 14th for the next board meeting. I will note that it's my intention to be in person for that meeting with anybody else that feels comfortable joining. And we will figure out the logistics and safety measures and however to make that happen. But for those of you that are that travel in for the board meetings, I wanted to let you know that so that you could make travel arrangements if you desire to be in person with us at that time. We can set a tentative date for the August board meeting. So if anybody wants to look at their calendars, probably it would typically be the 20th or the 27th. Is that correct? That's typically when it's done? Martha Gale, you're muted.
I thought it would be the 13th or the 20th. But
oh. Does anyone have a preference over the 20th? My kids go back to school the 18th, so the 20th is a great day for me. But anybody else with kids in that consideration? Does anybody have a conflict with August 20th?
That sounds good to me.
Approved.
Okay, so we will set August 20th as the tentative date for that meeting. And so that brings us to the last agenda item. I appreciate everybody joining virtually. I know it's a difficult format, and the muting and the unmuting and the getting on and getting off and that sort of thing. So I appreciate everybody's patience as we've done this. It is the only way that we've been able to keep going during this time. So I certainly appreciate it. So until we meet again, I wish everybody health and wellness. Be careful and be safe, and we'll see each other shortly. Does anybody else have anything before I adjourn?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care, guys.
It is 1:54 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, y'all.